Hi, I'm Jasper, and if you woke up today with a craving to model a horrible little chick, then you're in luck, because that's what I'm doing today. Now, this won't be a detailed tutorial, this will be a rough overview of my overall workflow, but hopefully there'll be a couple sprinkles of some good little info. Before I opened up Blender, I made sure to draw my idea on my sketchbook. It wasn't a very good drawing, to be honest. I always start by taking a plane and then in edit mode, extruding the edges to create the rough silhouette of the bird. Once that's done, I extrude all the faces, then go to the modifiers tab and add the mirror modifier. Make sure to tick clipping so the mesh doesn't split apart when you start to do some changes. Here I fatten this baby bird up, not with barley, but with proportional editing. That's such a weird thing to say. So use proportional editing to push and pull. Is it? I swear the geese are like deliberately interrupting me. Use proportional editing to push and pull the mesh. Give it a good thickness. I got two basic UV spheres for the eyes, put them in the rough place, and then modeled the head around that. And then I extruded some very basic little wing nubs. As you might have noticed, birds aren't blocky, so go to the modifiers tab and add the multi-res modifier. The multi-res modifier is completely underrated. It's probably my favorite modifier, and people aren't talking about it enough. It's really powerful, and I use it every time for my creature models. So the multi-res modifier works pretty much the same as the subdivision surface modifier, except it's a bit more powerful, and you can constantly change between different iterations of resolution to make your viewpoint nice and smooth. So once you got it to a good place, subdivide it a few times, then go into sculpt mode. I like to work on the base outline first, getting the muscles and the overall proportions correct, then going in with the finer details. I mean, isn't that kind of how everyone works? That's not really, it's not really a mind-blowing tip there, Jasper. There is no secret tip for learning how to do sculpting well. All I can say is that it's practice. It's the same thing as drawing, really. You just got to keep on doing it. Anytime I want to add more detail and the vertices just aren't there, I just subdivide it a few more times and add in the horrible skin flabbiness. I spent pretty much all of my efforts on the legs, the head and the neck. Everything else is going to be covered with fluff, so there's no point adding any detail if it's going to be covered up anyway. I like to work very lazily, so I only sculpt the absolute parts which are going to be shown on camera. Now, when it comes to texturing, everyone always goes on about you got to re-topologize your mesh, you've got to properly spend ages UV unwrapping, but here's the thing, don't tell anyone, alright? I don't UV unwrap properly, and I don't remesh. The beauty of the multi-res modifier is that your original mesh is still there in edit mode. Honestly, it's so low poly, you don't even need to remesh it. And when it comes to UV unwrapping, I just go smart UV project. That's all I do. I mean, look, this isn't the correct way to do it. And I'm sure if you're working with a team of people on a professional studio pipeline, you've got to learn it the proper way. You might run into some issues with texturing. I've run into that before. But at that point, I'm too lazy to do it all over again. I'm being a bad influence here. You really should learn it properly. I'm just too lazy, and I'm way too cool to re-topologize. Like, look, only nerds re-topologize. That's my phone. The texturing here is pretty straightforward. I didn't do anything crazy, but I spent a long time on the neck colors. The secret I found to making the neck and skin textures really horrible was to use a large variety of hues. I found the purple works really well because it implies undersurface veins and mottled skin, and it's all very horrible. In the shader panels, I used ambient occlusion to give some dirt into the tiny little crevices. Now, if you were smart, you'd bake that ambient occlusion texture, so which would save on render time. I didn't do that because I forgot. The chick's claws was just a cube subdivided a few times and then moved into the correct position. I used the mirror modifier as well to save time doing the other foot. I used Rigify's built-in bird rig to rig my abomination. In edit mode, I adjusted the mesh to fit my bird's proportions, and I deleted a couple of the wing bones because it doesn't really have wings, it just has little stumps. Once that was all ready, I paired my mesh to the thing using automatic weights, and from there I generated a proper rig by hitting the generate rig button. It's all very easy. I wanted the chick to have really fluffy, cute feathers like the cutest chicks and ducklings do. I wanted that to kind of contrast with the horrible, fleshy vulture neck. I thought that would be quite funny. To do that, I used a very basic particle system. Under timing, make sure you set it to random so it gives it a really authentic fluffiness. So all the hair lengths are slightly different. The material was just a basic principled hair setup. I added a second particle system and had it select only over the head and neck. I thought it worked really well to kind of sell this kind of straggly, remaindery kind of hair that left over. I was rushing through the whole modeling process, so the whole thing only took about 2 hours from start to finish. When it comes down to the animation, the Rigify rigs are really powerful, so they really helped me out on that one. And luckily, I do keep geese. They're horrible creatures. So I spent a long time just analysing how they walked, how the weight distributes from one to the other. And although it's not very obvious in the final result because it's not very good animation, it really does help to actually look at real reference. The way I animate is to kind of get the rough animation there first. Make sure the foot stepping is going first. And then once you're kind of roughly happy with the movement, then you can go in with the secondary animation, the bum wiggles, the hip shifting and swiveling. You can also check hair dynamics on the chick, which will cause the chick's fur to fluff up and, you know, bounce around like real hair, and it really helps sell the animation. I did a full tutorial on how to animate birds properly, so if you want to check out that, then check it out. Maybe it's linked up there. I really hope I figure out how to do this, otherwise it's going to look very odd. The multi-res modifier was a lifesaver for me. So when I was animating, I was animating on a very low resolution, and then when it came to render, it would render every single horrible wrinkle just as I liked. I couldn't be asked to model an environment, so I just got my camera and filmed the ground outside my house. I motion tracked it and then projected the footage onto a ground plane using the UV project modifier. This was great actually because it allowed the ambient light of the ground to accurately reflect back on the bird and just give it correct global illumination. Now, as you might have noticed, the final render is really flickery and it doesn't look very good. Well, that's because I'm running off a MacBook Pro. I don't have the computing power to do it at more than like 5 samples. It's pretty bad. Often you can get away with very low sample rates on certain types of renders. However, hair systems take ages to render, and so it's no wonder they do look a bit flickery. I actually won a Blender competition where I rendered it out at only 15 samples, which I was quite proud of considering, well, I mean, I did win it, so. All right, well, there's the final result. It's not very good, to be honest. It looks okay, but considering I did the whole thing in about a day, that's not too shabby. I use this workflow for every time I create a new creature. It's very quick, very dirty, but it gets the job done. And you can apply it to anything. You know, chickens, terror birds. You've got a very magnificent build. Ow! Small geese. Nah, I'm kidding. You can do it with anything.
Outrageous. I am a conscious being and I have a right to life.
Anyway, that's about everything I can think of. So you go out there, make some horrible little birds and come back to me and let me see. We'll make a little flock together. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit.